Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Just before it left office, the Biden administration proposed new guidelines for licensing inventions funded by the National Science Foundation. My next guest says the proposed rules exceed the NSF's authority and that they thicken bureaucracy and micromanage the whole thing. Joe Allen is executive director of the Bayh-Dole Coalition. He joins me now. Mr. Allen, good to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And just a brief word about the Baye-Dole. I remember Bayh-Dole Coalition, but not everyone does these days.
Well, I was privileged to work for Senator Birch Bayh, who was a Democrat from Indiana. I was on his Senate Judiciary Committee, and one of his colleagues was Senator Robert Dole, who was a conservative Republican from Kansas. And they didn't agree on much, but they actually liked each other. I mean, they respected each other. It's kind of like you respect a good player on the other team. And in 1978, they became aware that the federal government was literally giving away hundreds of billions of dollars of government research because they destroyed any incentives for it to be commercialized. So even in the midst of the 1980 election season, they introduced the Baye-Dole Act, which basically takes power out of Washington and says if an invention is made by a university or a small company or a federal laboratory, they own it, not the bureaucracy. There are certain rules they have to do. They have to find a small company if they can, make it in the United States. But it's not an exaggeration to say that helped ignite or reignite American innovation and propelled us from number 3 in innovation to undisputed number 1. So it really has been a huge transformation.
All right. And so the coalition then fosters that kind of development and that attitude toward federally funded research.
Right. Exactly.
And what happened at the NSF just a few weeks ago, really, that concerns you?
Well, it runs against the Baye-Dole Act. And I didn't realize this. I wasn't aware of this program. National Science Foundation is one of the main sponsors of basic research. In fact, it was one of the things that actually spawned the federal government getting into research after World War II. It was actually established by Vannevar Bush to then President Roosevelt and President Truman to say the government should be funding basic research, which is actually one of our strengths against our foreign competitors. I became aware of this program where NSF is funding programs with universities and industry co-sponsors. Nothing wrong with that. But rather than letting them decide how to own the intellectual property if patents are made there, NSF is dictating the terms. And well, I had actually talked, this is a whole new program to me. So they actually had, as you mentioned, at the end of the Biden administration, had some new rules from Washington telling people how inventions had to be managed. And when I looked at it, our members were talking about it. I said quite simply, this violates the law. NSF does not have the legal authority to be telling you this. They fund the research, put some guidelines out there, and get out of the way.
What were they specifically telling people to do with the intellectual property that they had not been told to do prior to these proposals?
Well, what I found out was this was not a new thing. Apparently, this program has been micromanaged from the beginning. So what they're doing is they're mandating to universities, if you have companies that are helping to sponsor the research, they have to get certain rights back. And the problem has been that from someone I talked to yesterday, this program has been very unproductive. Nothing is coming out the other end because they've destroyed the incentives needed for commercialization. So that in a nutshell is the problem. Again, nothing wrong with NSF funding the research, no knock on NSF, but this is a Washington solution in search of a problem. So you have people that really obviously don't know much about patent licensing, telling people that do how you have to manage things coming out. And what they've done is they've bollocksed up the system so much that no one has the incentives to take inventions from this program and actually turn them into products.
Which program is it? It's not everything across the board from NSF, but just in a certain area?
Yes, it's actually, I don't have their formal name in front of me, but it's actually a specific program that funds university research that's actually going to be co-sponsored by industry. So it's when you come in there, you have the university and 6 companies working together. Nothing wrong with that. But what they should do is say, okay, when you come to us for the proposal, you decide how you're going to manage inventions that come out of it. You decide under the law. What they've done is they said, this is how they'll be managed if you take our funding. And that's the crux of the problem. Nothing against the program, but this is Washington bureaucracy, again, micromanaging something that they frankly don't have expertise in.
We are speaking with Joe Allen. He's executive director of the Bayh-Dole Coalition. Now, this is a proposed rule change in how this is managed. Have you heard any overtures from the Trump administration that they're going to revoke those proposed rules? or not go forward with them?
We have not. I mean, as you well know, the Trump administration is pretty busy right now. I'm not sure this is on the radar screen, but President Trump did put out an executive order last week instructing the Office of Management and Budget and the head of each agency to look at any rules, policies, or regulations that violate federal law. This clearly falls under that rubric. So I'm expecting it any time now, and we've made this public. We broadcast our comments there. So I'm hopeful that the Trump administration, there were a couple of other things the Biden administration did in the last days, very much like this, that undermined Baye-Dole and tried to reestablish Washington micromanagement. And again, we don't want to cut research. We don't want to undermine any relationships with NSF that are legitimate. But this kind of Washington micromanagement is really harmful. And the bottom line is it prevents this research from being turned into useful products that help grow our economy. So there really is a downside to this.
And by micromanagement, you mean that the NSF wanted the government to retain certain rights to that intellectual property or to those inventions?
No, actually what they're doing is they're directing the universities how they have to manage it. So they're saying, you will give these kind of licenses out, you will do this, you will do that. And what the universities, a number of universities have put comments in there. And what they said more nicely than we did, hey, listen, these rules undermine our ability to actually manage this intellectual property. So again, this is Washington telling universities how to manage inventions they make, which the Baye-Dole Act says that's up to the universities. As long as they comply with the law, they report the invention, they try to find a small business licensee, they try to have the invention made here, Washington butts out. And that's why Baye-Dole has worked. You get the bureaucracy, they do what they do well. NSF is very good at funding research. Do that, make sure people are complying with the contract, and get the hell out of the way.
Is this also part of the whole ecosystem known as SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Program, that a lot of agencies, including DOD, have? It's not NSF, but it's also federally funded research, which is supposed to result in development of small business.
This is different than that because this is not restricted to small companies. This is any company. And, what they do is they have a certain area, like materials, and they'll say, okay, find companies that want to co-sponsor the research. NSF will put some funding in there. You bring the industry funding in. Again, nothing wrong with that as a concept. And it could be small companies, large companies, whatever. But where it breaks down is then they go back and say, and here's how intellectual property will be managed. And that's where you violate Baye-Dole. That's the red line. The government says, no. That's under the law. That's decentralized to the universities and the small companies. That's not your business. You have plenty of other things to do. If you don't, you can be talking to Elon Musk. But telling people how to manage intellectual property is not one of your duties. It's under a federal law. This is a 45-year-old statute. It's nothing new.
Sure. And just briefly, who are the types of organizations that make up Baye-Dole these days?
We have a number. In fact, if you look on our website, which is called Bayh-Dole, D-O-L-E, Coalition, all one word, a long word, .org, all of our members are listed there. We have industry members, university members, venture capitalists, manufacturers, small companies, large companies, basically anybody who is working in this space. And again, one of the successes of Baye-Dole is that because of the law, universities and companies are working very successfully to turn these into new products. We're leading the world in doing that. The Chinese are trying to copy this. So the last thing we want now is the Washington bureaucracy intervening and mucking up something which is working. If it was broken, that's one thing. This is working.
And by the way, you have some history in this as a federal Commerce Department executive.
I do. Actually, I was on Senator Birch Bayh's staff when we passed the law, and I was also the director of technology commercialization at the Department of Commerce, which under the law, the Department of Commerce oversees Baye-Dole. So I sort of did the trifecta in Washington, and I was privileged to work at the Department of Commerce, which I enjoyed very much. And what the Commerce is charged with is making sure agencies stay in their lane. This is exactly the kind of thing that Congress did not want. And, we're blowing the whistle saying, hey, listen, nice program, but you've gone beyond what your prerogatives are. It's not your business to micromanage how the intellectual property is managed.
Joe Allen is Executive Director of the Bayh-Dole Coalition. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking with you.
And we'll post this interview along with a link to more information at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.